Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show on 670 The Score. Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune at Halas Hall. After day two of padded practice, things ramped up, as they say. Things revved up for the defense. Not a good day for the offense, Dan. This is the time of training camp. It's always on the calendar where people start to worry about one bad practice because it sounds like the offense had one bad practice.
Well, you've got a choice at training camp. Every single day you come out here, you want the good news or the bad news. The bad news is that the offense was ugly today. They were inefficient. They were sloppy. They were flat, in the words of their starting quarterback. The good news is that the defense, albeit the second unit defense going against the ones, and then the first unit defense going against the second offense, was really sharp and playing with fire and playing with the type of I guess edge that you really want to see them develop here. And so it's a zero-sum game, and so it depends on which choose your own adventure you want to go down.
Well, because there's so much focus on the quarterback and so much focus on the receivers and how the offensive line is coming together, let's keep the focus there, because that was where I believe, let's start with Justin Fields. He met with the media after the practice. Let's start with that, Dan, because I think I hear you describe his demeanor in the interview room, and then we can get into what made him kind of feel the way that he did, a little deflated, if you will, or just a little bit, obviously critical of his own offense. But take us inside the interview room and what Justin Fields shared with you.
Well, I will say this, to Justin's credit, a sign of perhaps his maturity. We were expecting perhaps a surly Justin Fields after a practice today that was, as by all accounts, by Justin's own account, rough and bumpy and inefficient and all those things that we mentioned. And he came to the media room with good spirits and an understanding that this is something that the Bears can learn from in early August that can hopefully help them in September and October and November. He said he met with his teammates after practice to really push the notion of, when the defense is playing against us with a level of juice and swagger and edge, we got to match it. And we've got to take every little positive play that we have and sometimes inject a little enthusiasm and emotion into that positive gain, to get that juice flowing, to get that energy moving in the right direction. I think it's a notable observation. I think it's a notable mission now for this offense going forward to try to develop some of that. The problem is when you look personality wise, it's you have to play that game of trying to generate that juice and the energy without making it artificial. And that's going to take some calibrating, I think, for this group, because you've got a guy like Darnell Mooney, who's naturally kind of a quieter type of guy. You've got a guy like DJ Moore, who, he can show his fire at times, but is more steady. You've got Justin, who is pretty stoic in most cases and is very calm, as a quarterback should be, but may need to kind of ramp that up a little bit so that the people around him ramp it up a little bit. It's an interesting kind of formula that they've got to put together emotionally, even as they go back now on Wednesday afternoon and dig into the tape and try to figure out X's and O's wise and execution wise and performance wise what went wrong beyond just the energy.
And emotionally, Justin Fields is the leader of this group. He may be only in his third season, but that is the role and the responsibility that comes with being a franchise quarterback, which is why I think when he went to the podium today, this was good to hear. And this was kind of part of the job as well, that he needs to, obviously, this is probably one of his strengths right now as a quarterback, in saying things as honest and as candid as he does, and holding, I think, him and his teammates accountable. And this is what he had to say about basically the defense winning the practice.
We're in a good spot right now. I think the biggest thing we need to do is be more consistent. And I think today in practice we came out probably a little flat. So I just talked to the guys after practice. Just, every little thing that we do, that, every little win that we have on the field, we just need to have energy about it, because that energy is contagion. That's one thing I think the defense does well, is like every little thing that they do. DBs are always hyping stuff up. They're always doing. So it's like, and that just like gets the whole defense going. So, I told the offense today, like, we just need to have that same juice as the defense did. But I felt like the defense came out and they competed well with us, and I would say they definitely won the day. So we have an off day tomorrow, but the next day, offense has to come back stronger. So a lot
of people in offense that are like that. I mean, on the side you got Bojack, you know how those guys gonna be. DeMarcus, what are the guys offensively that are naturally like that?
I would say Chase for sure. I would say Chase is a very emotional player. Even today he was getting into it with the defense a little bit. I would say Chase is one big one. Mooney's more like just calm. He's more like even keeled. I would say DJ's the same way, but I think, once he really starts making plays, I mean, you've seen on the field the game winner where PJ threw the deep bomb. I mean, he had a bunch of energy there. So I just think we need to do it more in practice. I feel like it's more natural in the game to where that energy comes from. But I would say, we need to do it more in practice to get everybody kind of going like that.
David, there's a couple notable things I take out of that clip. The first one is Justin's right. It is more natural in the game. We've seen Justin display that emotion in games after big runs, after big plays, after big moments and drives that result in touchdowns. And so I think his kind of almost a self-talk to himself is like, all right, let's bring that out every day. Let's try to bring it out of myself. Let's try to bring it out of the guys around me. The second thing that I take note of out of that bite is I would not be leaning on Chase Claypool to be your emotional tone setter. I mean, Darnell Mooney came into the media room a little bit after Justin Fields and described Chase as a hothead, as a guy who needs people around him to keep his emotions in check. And so that's not the guy that I would be giving the match to and saying, hey, go light our fire, because he's bound to burn the whole huddle down, And so they're going to have to find a calibration there that makes sense for them. And look, like I think Mooney also said afterwards that, it does start with the quarterback, and the quarterback's got to be an energy source and a tone setter inside the huddle. And when it feels flat and when it feels like the energy is low, well, now it's your job not only to call the play and execute the play, but you got to get guys kind of amped up.
Okay, so I got a lot of thoughts on this. So I think, first of all, I want to qualify everything that we're talking about and everything I'm about to say, that I don't really put a lot of stock, and I don't think a lot of people don't, but it's a practice in August before the first preseason game, which precedes the second. There's not a whole lot to base, or you shouldn't get too overwhelmed, good or bad.
Fair.
But I'd also think that when I hear Justin Fields, you're nodding a lot, and I'm hearing that, and everybody likes what they hear because it does reflect leadership, as we talk about. But I don't think he's got it right here. And not just picking on Justin Fields, but I always think that this is a mistake by young quarterbacks in football specifically. Offensive players and offensive performance, execution is not related to emotion. That's defense. That's the way you play defense. At the NFL and college football, at high school, at any level, you have to have a defensive mentality. You have to bring the adrenaline. You have to be like Eddie Jackson, chirping all the time. You've got to be like a guy that gets yourself at a place so you can, if you're a lineman, have all these car crashes after car crashes every single snap. That's an emotional way to play football. On offense, it's so dependent on precision and poise. I don't know that there's that much room for all that passion, or if it matters. So I don't know that, I want my quarterback to come in the huddle and be the most jacked up guy. I want him to exude confidence, cool, composed confidence. So I know this is maybe we're splitting hairs, but I don't care if he's not that motivated or if he's not that energetic or that enthusiastic. I want him to execute. If he can execute, fine. So I don't know if it's as much related to not being intense and matching that emotion as much as they're not there yet from a precision point of view. And forget about Chase Claypool, because he is so up and down. You don't want your offense to be that. You want to be like this.
Yeah, no. I mean, Claypool got into it today with T.J. Edwards. He was barking at Jalen Jones, the second team defensive back, and he had to have multiple people, including Cole Kmet, college, tell him to calm down. Enough, Chase, just enough. And so that's not what we're looking for. I'm with you to a point in terms of making sure that the precision is there, making sure the execution is there, making sure the focus is there. But I do think that there is an energy that needs to start in the huddle. And I do think there's an energy that if you do, either have a play that produces a first down that you can kind of create that energy momentum going, or B, as what happened many times on Wednesday at Haugh, when the defense is knocking you down, kicking you while you're down, and then talking to you while they kick you while you're down, you better not just sit there and take it. And I think there was an element today of the offense kind of taking it. And I think it rubbed Justin the wrong way. I know it rubbed offensive coordinator Luke Getsy the wrong way, because he was very upset at the first unit offense for kind of meandering back to the huddle, kind of, I don't know if sulking is the right word, but whatever, one level above sulking is, where it's just let's go, yes, they've just got us to go 3 and out 2 times in a row, but let's get back in the huddle and let's have some urgency. Let's have some passion about it.
Yeah, I'm going to get to what Getsy said in a moment, but I think, and I am kind of splitting hairs here. I think what I'm talking about is mental toughness. And I think when you're mentally tough, you have the ability to distinguish when you need to turn on the nasty and when you need to kind of push back, and when you need to keep your cool when somebody's trying to instigate something and get inside your head. And the most mentally tough quarterbacks and athletes that we see and we know are the ones who are able to calibrate that properly, play to play, series to series, game to game. So that's what you're looking for offensively as much as anything. Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, who I think can probably be a guy that you can get that adrenaline going a little bit. I think he can be a little bit excitable. He addressed this after the practice in front of the Bears media, and this is what he had to say.
We don't play touch football, so I'm okay. I'm not going to overreact. I got probably more emotional than anybody else did because I was getting, but yeah, that was touch football. That wasn't real football. So we're a physical football team. We run through tackles and all that stuff. So I'm not going to get too overworked up about that.
We did see some of that emotion towards the end of that 11-on-11 move the ball drill.
Yeah.
What was it?
Well, that's the natural thing, right? When you have 2 or 3 3-and-outs, you have this natural reaction to feel sorry for yourself, and I just sensed that the guys weren't running back to the huddle the way they always do, and so that's where someone had to step up.
That's what you don't want, Dan. You don't want the body language to be screaming, "We don't want to be here," or "We're tired," or anything, or "We're beaten," or "We have no confidence." That's what I mean. There's such a fine line. You know when you see it, and good coaches are able to get their players to respond a certain way so they don't look like they're tired. It's the end of practice and they're looking at their watch.
So there's a couple notable things here. The reason this is significant today is because this was the longest training camp practice to date. It was the most physically demanding training camp practice to date. We got up towards 2.5 hours on the practice field here at Halas Hall, and there were guys on the offense that noticed things flat and low on energy very early in practice. You can't notice those things in the first 15 to 20 minutes and not have them change 2.5 hours in. And so that results in a stretch. The Bears going to 7-on-7. Justin throws back-to-back interceptions in 7-on-7 and follows that with 2 incompletions. Ball's not supposed to hit the ground in 7-on-7, and you got 4 consecutive reps where the defense is either taking it the other way or knocking it down. Not good. You get in the 11-11 period, and you have 3 consecutive series where you go 3 and out against the second-team defense. Man, that's not promising, and look, like they'll tell you and they'll put the positive spin on it afterwards to say, we're not game planning for our defense yet. And we're trying a lot of things out in training camp, throwing a lot of different concepts out there. It's not all going to be clean and pretty, but there is something that comes to having the urgency. Look, like I've talked for months now about what's going to happen in 2 weeks when they go to Indianapolis. If the Indianapolis Colts kick you in the teeth in one of those crossover practices and you just, in Luke's words, walk back to the huddle feeling sorry for yourself, it's going to be embarrassing. This isn't Bears against Bears. It's going to be Bears against Colts, and you're going to get embarrassed against an opponent that's going to leave you with a lot of second guessing going toward the regular season. So maybe it's a good wake-up call that this happened. I will say this again, like going back to my earlier statement, to watch the first unit defense going against the twos today and not only playing well, but then telling the second unit offense how well they're playing. There was an edge on the field, and Brad Biggs, who's in training camp number 23, covering this team, said he can't remember a training camp practice during his entire time on the beat that was so one-sided for one unit over the other. Defense was that dominant today, and you got guys like Jaquan Brisker making plays, talking about it. There was one moment where at least 5, possibly 6 defenders were surrounding Velus Jones after a dropped pass and literally almost baiting him to respond. And no one from the offense even came to get his back for a good 30 to 45 seconds. And so it was really one-sided in that end. And Tremaine Edmunds, we just got done hearing from him on Wednesday afternoon. He just said, look, as a guy who comes from defenses in Buffalo that were really good and developed that edge, it was fun to watch that today, fun to listen to that today, to see the plays being made and that ball of energy just start to pick up steam and momentum in a way that really becomes infectious.
Well, because that can help compensate for other shortcomings. You can have, not always, sometimes talent is always going to prevail, but if you have that edge, if you have those intangibles, if you're smarter and more intense and you don't take any plays off, that's the attitude you can control. And I think that's what Matt Eberflus and his coaches are looking for. So that's interesting observation. I want to get back to Getsy for a moment because there's been a lot of conversation about DJ Moore, because I think he's probably, you'd agree, been the player of training camp offensively so far. And Luke Getsy how did he address what DJ Moore means to the offense, Dan?
Well, look, like we've heard a lot here really since the spring and now into training camp about some of the nuances of DJ's game that make him special. He's got this kind of deceptive speed. He's got this quickness, but it's the way he uses his body that has really caught a lot of people's attention. We've heard Justin say he's got very easy body language to read for a quarterback. You can tell where he is in his route and where the ball needs to be delivered and how to get it there. We heard Tyreek Stevenson earlier this week talk about his body control is really frustrating to play against because he has a knack for making plays that most humans shouldn't have the ability to make. And so Luke kind of went on top of this as a guy. Obviously, remember, like, Luke started his time in Green Bay coaching receivers. He's got a background in coaching receivers. He's got an appreciation for what high-level receivers look like. Spent a lot of time building a bond with Devontae Adams. And so here were some of his comments on how DJ Moore has caught his attention.
Such a powerful man. His play strength and balance and body control are his strengths for sure. He has patience when the ball's in the air too. Like that's a talent that I remember James Jones talking about all the time back then. Like just having the patience to let the ball come to you and not let the DB know that the ball's right there, until it's already caught. And so, I mean, you can see those in him. And so it's been fun to let the young guys kind of learn that from him.
Luke, what has DJ done kind of for the rest of the wide receiver room too? Has he allowed them to kind of play more to their strengths and settle into roles that maybe they were a little bit out of last year?
I think most importantly, I think he's gone in that room and taken a really good leadership spot. And I think he does it by his work ethic, his humility. I mean, that guy's a grinder. He's all about his teammates. And when he makes a mistake, he owns it. I think that's all invaluable stuff that every young player is able to see. And then the relationship with the quarterback's important to him. And so those young guys, again, learning the way to be a pro has probably been the best thing that we've been able to have with DJ in the room on, despite all the good stuff he's doing on the field as well.
Interesting, because I think that's the example you want. That's the production you're looking for. And the Bears, again, the wide receiving core are going to be among the most interesting to see develop, but I think they have a chance to be one of the strengths of this team.
There's no question about it. And so, look, like, this is a work in progress. We understand that. Luke also talked at length after practice about Justin's progress in the rhythm and timing part of the passing game and seeing that come along on a daily basis. The one thing that Getsy will bring, as we've talked about many times before, is just an ability to properly interpret a rough day like this in a way that isn't panic stricken, but still provides some direction and purpose to the guys in his room. And I think, today it looked like we're 7 practices into camp. There's a lot we're working on. There's a lot of mistakes being made on every single play, and we got to get them cleaned up. And to hear Justin talk about it today, like, there are things that are controllable. It's route precision. It's the communication in the huddle. It's knowing what you're seeing pre-snap. And it's working through all those things so that when the ball is snapped, now you've given yourself a greater chance at success, and the sloppiness doesn't become the defining trait of the afternoon.
That's coaching. That's good coaching. Before we move on to the offensive line, a couple questions there. I want to know, Darnell Mooney obviously talked about the growth in Justin Fields' difference from one year to another. He obviously talked about his own progress, and it's hard to tell that he was ever injured. But I wanted to ask you about something specifically. He said that might look worse on your computer screen or your phone on Twitter than it sounded coming out of his mouth at the podium when he said about the quarterback needing to have the juice, having the quarterback needing to be the guy that prevents this flat performance from occurring. It could look like he was pointing a finger at Justin Fields, and maybe he was, but the relationship rapport is good enough that the respect exists. What did he mean, and how did he say it?
Hey, that's a good question, David, because I can see how that, having sat in the room, it didn't even register with me as like, ooh, that's going to be something that, Pro Football Talk's going to turn into a headline this afternoon. Out of Darnell's mouth, it's just kind of a sincere assessment of the day and what was needed. As you mentioned, those two are very close. So I didn't take it as a shot at Justin or even anything that was critical. It was just, hey, look, like, Justin's still a young player. He's a third-year quarterback. He's got growth to make, and one of the areas that growth is potentially needed is just being a tone setter in the huddle. And if it is flat, okay, QB1, like, to take the reins here and you create it, create that juice, create that energy, and we'll follow, because you are the guy we're all following right now, and everyone in the world understands that. The last episode that you and I recorded, we're talking about people in the outside world talking about Justin playing an MVP level, like we're so many steps from that. It's ridiculous. But if we're going to set high goals and high benchmarks, well, then there's a lot of little things that come with playing the position that are prerequisites for getting there. We talked about that Netflix series on quarterback, and you've watched Patrick Mahomes operate on the sideline in the huddle after good plays and bad plays, and you feel that he's the charging station for the entire group, and I think that's sort of the demand now on Justin is to get there. And I think that's all Darnell was saying. I mean, maybe he'll go to Justin later and say, hey man, like, I just, so you know, this is what I was trying to get across when I spoke to
He's
media,
not
but I
that
didn't.
he's not the kind of guy either. He's not the kind of player. So I think that it's good to provide that context because you can understand what he means and why he said that without jumping to a conclusion that doesn't need to be reached.
No question. No
All right,
question.
so offensive line, Tevin Jenkins left practice. Nate Davis missed another practice. I know they don't discuss injuries, but what happened with Tevin Jenkins? And this is somebody is no stranger to the injury tent.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened to him, and nobody in this building is going to tell us. And so we're going to have to use our own eyes in the days ahead. The Bears will have an off day on Thursday, return to practice Friday and Saturday at House Hall before Family Fest on Sunday. You would be hopeful that Tevin Jenkins will be back at practice as soon as humanly possible, because to your point, we've talked about the potential in this kid. We talked to Tevin on Tuesday about how much better he's gotten at understanding the physical maintenance part of this job and the things he does to put himself in position to be more durable, to be more available. And then the very next day, he's leaving practice early. Don't know what the ailment is. We'll have to figure it out. He's a guy that has talked to us at length about the attention he has to pay to his back because he has had surgery. He has, things in his back that have bothered him before. We don't know if it's related to that. Don't know if it was a hamstring pull, dehydration, whatever. I'm not sure. But the biggest question that we've had about Tevin Jenkins really since he got here is he going to be able to play 15 consecutive games for you at any point in his career? And to do that, you're going to have to be available. And so Luke Getsy didn't know what had happened to him. He did say that, accountability is based on availability. And so the hope would be that Tevin gets back sooner than later. And the hope would be that Nate Davis would be right there with them. Because to your point, for a guy who missed a couple weeks of practice in OTAs to now have missed the first 2 padded practices of training camp, you start saying we've spent all this time hyping up what this offensive line could be. Well, all of a sudden they're not whole, and now you got Lucas Patrick on one side of Cody Whitehair. You got Alex Leatherwood mixing in on the other side of them. You've got the defense dominating the day. And it's just like, oh man, can Chicago handle another roller coaster of this proportion, particularly if it's unsettled on the offensive line and it provides another element of instability to an offense that needs as much stability as it can find anywhere.
Both guys, I think, merit scrutiny. One, because Nate Davis or Tevin Jenkins, first of all, is a guy with a pretty significant injury history. And so when he leaves a practice, I don't think it's like, it is almost a headline. And it is something that you feel like, you jump at the conclusions because he's earned that kind of skepticism. And as for Nate Davis, I thought it was interesting and telling. On Wednesday morning, Brad Biggs was on the Mully and Haugh show, and I asked Biggs about the same thing. And Nate Davis is in there, what do you think? And he's like, well, he's missed a lot of games in the past. So this isn't, look at the back of, basically look at his track record, and he has missed games with injury. And then you start to think like, well, yeah, that's exactly right. What exactly are they getting here? Do we know in this veteran who's supposed to provide stability if he's going to be on the field long enough to provide stability?
No question. And that's why setting realistic expectations, both on the micro level with individual players and on the macro level with the entire team is paramount to having any level of sanity in 2023, because I think we've spent so many months in the outside world considering best case scenarios across the board. And the best case scenario here, best case scenario B, best case scenario XYZ. Well, you start to see some of the worst case scenarios and you go, oh God, right. And worst case scenario is being less than 2 weeks into training camp and having 2 of your very valued starting guards out of practice. Now, maybe they'll both be back and won't miss another day from this point forward. But to your point, the scrutiny is earned, and it certainly deserves to have the spotlight on it until the spotlight's no longer needed.
Okay, I want to touch on a couple of things defensively before we get out of here. Tremaine Edmunds addressed the Bears media today, and it does seem like when he talks, every time he gets a little more comfortable, a little bit more acclimated, he seems to be, I can't believe Danny's 24 years old. I just don't believe this guy's been in the league as long as he has, seems to be as comfortable as he is, and he's 24 years old, and still, I think he's going to emerge as a leader of this defense if he's not already.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, it's right now, like the guys that step up on a daily basis that seem to establish themselves in that leadership role are Tremaine and Eddie Jackson, which Quan Brisker close behind. And Edmund's ability, again, to make his presence felt, not only as a leader, but just in the middle of that field. You have Luke Getsy and Justin Fields both talking about him today in a way that, Justin's saying, man, like you look across there and there are windows that you expect to see against most defenses in the NFL, but because of how rangy Tremaine Edmunds is, because of his length, because of his height, those windows aren't as big as you'd want him to be as a quarterback. And it's a little bit intimidating. And so it's a good thing for Justin Fields to experience during training camp. It's certainly something that the Bears invested in Tremaine Edmunds, because they believe that he has the not only the speed but the size to make a difference in the middle of the field and close down windows that other quarterbacks feel like should be there. And so, I know we've talked a lot about his need to create splash plays, his need to be part of takeaways for this Bears defense. But if he can be just a guy that flusters an opposing quarterback's eyes, 6 to 10 times per game, now all of a sudden you've got a huge asset and a huge impact player.
So it was a day ago that Justin Jones, a player who is their prototypical 3-technique guy, the guy who talks a lot and had a decent season, I guess, in 2022. But he was talking about his role on this defense, Dan. He also talked about one of the two rookies. You have Pickens and Dexter, and he talked about Gervon Dexter. And this is what Justin Jones had to say about the rookie.
Yeah, that's a man right there. Yeah, he's a good player. I think once he really understands, the X's and O's outside of just, the D-line, like understanding the whole defense and, how offenses like come and try to attack certain defenses and certain styles of play, I think he's going to be a real dominant player in this league.
Is he leaning on you at all, asking questions?
Yeah, I mean, when he has questions, he'll ask me, but he's a smart player. He takes really good notes. He absorbs a lot of information, so that's a good thing about him. And I do feel like he's going to play a long time in this league.
How have
you seen him grow, Gervon? How have you seen him grow from maybe the first OTAs until now already?
I don't think we're done seeing him grow. Honestly, I think that we're just seeing the first glimpse of Gervon, in my opinion. He's as the intensity's picking up, he's picking up. That's how I see it. So, we get pads on tomorrow. So, I would expect something huge out of him because, he's a real physical dude. So, yeah, he's going to be good.
We talked to Dom the other day just about kind of his offseason and what he's added to his skill set. He said that because he isn't a natural pass rusher by trade since he changed positions, that his offseason review was go out, work with somebody who's done this. So he worked with Robert Mathis. What have you seen from him as far as him adding to his skill set that's going to make him a better edge rusher, since he didn't have, the years of experience that someone like yourself did?
Well, first of all, he is a natural, number one. If you see the way he moves and how he bends and the ankle flexion and the way he works his moves and gets around the edge, that's like God-given ability. That's not like something you can coach. So he is a natural. I do think that as the years go by and he does get the experience, I think he's going to be a really, really good. He's been a really good rusher this camp. But I think he's going to be even better as the years go by and he gets more experience because, like I said, he does have those God-given abilities that allow him to do certain things that a lot of guys really can't do, that a lot of guys spend their offseason trying to be able to do. So, that just comes naturally to him. So I think he's going to be really good.
He was telling us that Gervon is, using his leverage, using his weight, a little push-pull stuff early on. That's maybe a little surprising to see out of a rookie. So, maybe you see that out of a second, third, fourth-year player. Is there anything else that you notice with Gervon that makes you go like, wow, this rookie is maybe using some veteran moves here?
I mean, he benches like 500 pounds.
So, David, that's Justin Jones talking mostly about Gervon Dexter. The third question in there was him talking about Dominique Robinson and the year 2 jump that he's trying to make after working with Robert Mathis. But what was most notable to me about the praise from Jones to Dexter is that Gervon Dexter is basically nipping on Justin Jones's heels to take his job as the 3-tech difference-making guy in this defense. The Bears are going to need a rotation. Those guys are going to be part of a rotation this year and share some of that role. But that's notable for a veteran who has a guy coming in on his heels to be that praiseworthy of.
That's why I liked it. That's why I liked hearing guys like that talk about young players, showing them the way, providing the example, paying it forward in a way that somebody did for them earlier in their career. The other reason, Dan, I thought that was interesting to play, and I mentioned Edmunds, and I know this happens every year, not every year, but like those Bears defensive players, they're a confident bunch. And I'm sort of like struck by why they're a confident bunch. And they're coming off a 14-loss season. I know a couple of them are new to the franchise and organization, so they don't know any better. Others are rookies. But Dan, I think that if you asked players in the Bears on defense, what is the strength of this team? I think, as absurd as it almost sounds, I think they would say the defense is the strength of this team, or will be this year, because I think that that's the way you've got to approach it. if you're on this defense, because you've got a defensive-minded head coach, a very disciplined kind of defensive coordinator that wants everybody, talking about assignment football. Even though, again, thinks it's ridiculous to consider, because I think it's one of the weaker points and why they're going to be limited. I think defensive players probably think that they're going to lead this team.
Well, the problem is what we've talked about for months is that the pass rush still leaves a lot to be desired, and they still haven't addressed the edge rusher position. And DeMarcus Walker was missing from practice today, and that's a guy you paid a lot of money to come in and be the teeth of your edge rush, and you don't have a lot of depth there. And so that's what leaves me to kind of temper the expectations on that side of the ball. That said, you bring in new guys with confidence and ability, whether it's a Tremaine Edmunds as an established veteran, whether it's a Tyreek Stevenson as a very hungry rookie, whether it's a second-year guy like Kyler Gordon, who is, making those strides. You invest a high draft pick in him and you develop him. And now you start to see some of the fruits of the development, and you go, okay, this guy can be a real difference maker in the slot. And so things are moving in the right direction defensively. They had nowhere to go but up, coming off of last season, obviously, but there are pieces there that give you a lot of optimism and a lot of confidence. And I know we've talked previously about Brisker, because, man, like, this dude is nasty, man. He's nasty. He is fun to watch practice, and it's hard to find players in the modern NFL with the way camp regulations are that are fun to watch practice at training camp. And Jaquan Brisker is one of those, because of the passion he brings and because of the instincts he plays with.
Well, yeah, let me be clear too. I don't expect them to be the strength of the Bears team. I don't expect the defense. They might be, but I think that they might believe it, and that's all that matters. That's almost like good coaching. And it also brings it back to what, watching Matt Eberflus and the variety of interviews and opportunities he has to speak during training camp. He had an interview with Scott Pioli and Stacey Dales on the NFL Network.
Yep.
And he echoed something that you've heard before, and you're going to continue to hear again. Ryan Poles, whether it's retaining some of Ryan Pace's guys or getting his own and drafting and signing his own guys, they're getting players. It's a small thing, but they love football. You've got to love to play. And when you love to play, typically your confidence comes more easily, and they believe things that may not be true. So even though 14 losses, that's last season, that's for guys like us to talk about. They don't care, because they think that this season is going to be different because they're better and they believe they can lead this team. That's what I think is kind of exciting about this Bears defense, because they do start with a blank slate. Nobody thinks they're going to do anything. And the opposite of the Justin Fields effect, where he's got all these high expectations to meet and he could throw for 3,500 yards and people think it'd be a disappointment because he's not a superstar MVP. The Bear defense has nowhere to go but up. So if they hold the Packers to 17 points and win 19-17, they're like doing cartwheels because they won that game. And they think they're capable of doing that every week.
I mean, it sounds cliche because, like, why would you be a pro in something that you didn't love? And the Bears have talked forever about trying to find guys who love it. But I think they do genuinely have guys on defense who love it. And when you have a group of guys who love it, it creates a momentum. And like, one of the coolest things happening inside this building right now, I'll bring up Brisker again, is just the relationship that he has with Eddie Jackson and the way that those two have bonded, essentially, David, over what you've talked about, just a genuine love of football, a genuine love of talking football, a genuine love of getting together away from the facility and going over things that help them both get better at football. And so that's where the momentum gets created, and the momentum creates the confidence, which creates the swagger, which creates days like today where you can kick an offense in the teeth and then you can tell them about it. And we've watched 2018, that entire season was fueled by that type of mentality, where they walked into a stadium knowing that they were going to impose their will on another offense. And I still get goosebumps thinking of the energy inside Soldier Field for that primetime game against the Rams and what they did to back up that energy that was in the building that night in completely shutting down a team that was on its way to the Super Bowl. You go, man, like that was it. Like, that's the secret sauce. That's the secret recipe. And they're trying to rediscover that again 5 years later. Hopefully they're making strides in the right direction.
Good stuff. Good practice day for the defense. The offense will figure it out. And if they don't, we'll continue to talk about it anyway, because that will be a huge story. But it's only the beginning of August, people. Don't overreact to get too carried away. But whether it's good or bad, we'll be here to review it all and talk about it on the Take the North podcast. Anything we overlooked, Dan?
No, look, like, again, the intensity of camp is ratcheting up. And so everything from this point forward, we should have a series of longer practices. We should have a series of longer team stuff, 11-on-11 stuff that allow us to make bigger value judgments on what we're looking at. Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday morning, I guess it started in the morning and ended in the afternoon, was not a great day for the offense, was a really good day for the defense. And we'll see how both sides bounce back when they get back at it on Friday.
Sounds good. For Adam Szynski, our producer, Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune at Haugh, I'm David Haugh on the Mully and Haugh Show on 670 The Score. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast on your free Odyssey app. Thank you for watching us on the 670 Scores YouTube page. We will talk to you next time with another practice update from Haugh.
Great talk. See you out there.